Coming up on American Black Journal, is the city of Detroit turning the tide on violent crime? Police Chief James White is here for a wide-ranging conversation on last year's crime stats. We're going to talk about what led to this dramatic drop in homicides in the city and what work still remains. You absolutely don't want to miss today's show. American Black Journal starts right now.
From Delta faucets to Behr paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by Nissan Foundation and viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm your host, Stephen Henderson. As the new year gets underway, there is some really encouraging news coming from police departments across the nation. Many cities saw a drop in violent crime and homicides during 2023. That was the case here in Detroit as well. The city recorded 252 homicides, and that is the lowest number in 57 years. Non-fatal shootings were also down nearly 16%, and carjackings fell more than 33%. I spoke with Police Chief James White about these latest crime stats, what contributed to the drop, and where we go from here. So you and I have talked a lot over the years since you've been chief, and in fact, before, about the ways in which we need to reduce violent crime in the city of Detroit and in particular deal with homicides in the city. And I don't know another way to describe it. You got really good news at the end of 2023. The number of homicides that year was down, and not just down a little, I mean down significantly year over year. Let's start with you telling me why you think that happened and what some of the strategies were that you guys were employing last year that may have something to do with this.
You know, we're certainly not celebrating. I mean, we had 252 homicides this year, and that's 252 too many. But that is down from 309 a year prior. And so we're happy to see that our 12-point plan is working. We're happy to see that our layered approach to crime fighting is working, which involves addressing a number of things. Number one, the things that drive violent crime in our community, those social issues, those socioeconomic issues, our partnerships with the federal government, our state and local partnerships with the Wayne County Sheriff's Department, the Wayne County Executive's Office. The U.S. Attorney Dawn Eisen has just been an amazing partner in helping us drive down violent crime with the One Detroit Initiative. The Wayne County Prosecutor's Office looking at ways of efficiently prosecuting cases. The backlog issues at 36th District as well as the district court. So a lot of things have happened that has helped with this process. I say it often, but it's worth repeating. Having a mayor who is a former prosecutor helps when you're talking about crime solutions and budgeting and police. And certainly when you look at the fact that we have raises for our officers and able to put more officers on the street with an average of a $10,000 raise for each officer, that's very, very impactful. Cops on dots is what we call it. We look at where we have upticks in crime and we put those officers in those uptick areas using our data-driven enforcement.
Yeah. So I want to talk about a number of the things that you mentioned there in a little more in depth. And let's start let's start with the focus on the larger context of crime, the things that drive violent crime in our community. What are the things that the police department can do about those things? A lot of those things aren't about policing necessarily, but what things are you employing that you think are actually having an effect?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because in large part, police are reactive, right? I mean, by the time we get called when the crime happens. So what we try to do is address those issues before the crime happens. One big one is mental health. Our mental health co-response unit has been amazing. We're going to be adding to that with some help of some state dollars from the governor's office here pretty soon, and our neighborhood police officers. Those two entities, I think, have the greatest impact on preventative crime than any entity that we have, because they're on the ground, they're interacting with our community, they're talking to our community, and I'm speaking specifically to the NPOs, and those are. Again, those are, for those who don't know, that's our neighborhood police officers. Those are the people, before crime happens, can get out and address the issues that happen, for quality of life to people who are committing problems in the neighborhood proactively. And then they can do some proactive patrol techniques that we've deployed. They can bring in other officers, such as traffic enforcement. Like if there's a drag racing or drifting problem in a particular area, an NPO can go out and say, okay, we need more officers in this area, and they can coordinate that with their commander and their captain. But then when you look at our mental health co-response, we know that mental health is a crisis in our community. We know that a lot of our violent crime is driven by mental health issues. We know that a number of our domestic violence victims are dealing with someone who is in some form of mental health crisis. And so there's a lot of proactive work that goes into that. We also have a program that we're excited about that's coming out of the mayor's office and being led by our deputy mayor, retired First Assistant Chief in the Police Department, Todd Bettison, and he's working with our CVI, and that's our Community Violence Program, where these are civilians that are going out and they're working in areas that we've identified as been historically high in violent crime. And they're on the ground doing a number of proactive measures to ensure that that community is supported, that neighborhood matters, and that they got the resources available to them to hopefully disrupt crime before it happens.
Yeah. That CVI program is something that the mayor really kind of doubled down on recently and said that, look, we're going to put a lot more emphasis on that. We've always had community groups in Detroit that were focused on reducing crime, and it's always been a big part of the kind of criminal justice picture. What do you hope happens as a result of these new initiatives that's not already, I guess, taking place? How does what the mayor says he wants to do change the involvement of civilian groups?
Yeah, I think that we can learn a lot from what we're seeing. The early returns are extraordinarily promising. In some areas, a little bit surprising that they've had some early impact. We're going to learn a lot more over the next year, right? Because we know the reward for good work is more work. When we look at our numbers in 2023, in order to sustain it, you're going to have to do some innovative things, right? And we want to surpass the numbers of 23. And 23 was an incredible year for us with regards to our programs and our processes. And to go into 24 and say that we're less than we were in 23, it's going to be a heavy lift. So what's exciting for us is to see that the CVI has a chance of bringing something new to the table that we can learn from. 6 groups are out there. A couple of them have emerged from the pack, so to speak, as leaders in their area. But again, I don't want to mischaracterize it as a success just yet, because it's so early. But what I'm excited about is we can look at what they're doing, and if it is sustainable, and then adopt it across the landscape of our city in other areas, even beyond the moments of CVI, but adopting the programs that they have identified as being successful. It gives you an opportunity to do some pretty unique and innovative things, because we know that there are a lot of different things that drive violent crime in our community. We just know it, right? And it's not, by the time that the moment comes when the police are on a scene of a shooting, which is essentially a failed homicide, right? A non-fatal shooting, simply because the person lives does not mean that the intent wasn't to kill the person. It just, whatever happened led to them living. So you've got somebody that wanted to kill somebody. That doesn't, they didn't die. That doesn't mean it's going to stop. And that's not going to stop that person from wanting that person dead. So CVI brings in all those opportunities of bridging that gap. Maybe that suspect is on the run from the police, likely. That victim may take on a posture of wanting to retaliate against that suspect. What we're hoping that CVI will be able to do is disrupt that communication and say, no, you don't need to retaliate and try to get back at him through violent means and ultimately ruining your life or hurting someone who has absolutely nothing to do with the problem or that you're having with this person. We're hopeful that those types of conversations happen, that the police is much more involved in the police lane of enforcement and arrests and getting violent people off the street, but that the community itself has some degree of self-policing and regulating where police won't be as needed in some areas. So that's a very long answer to a quick question, but those are some of the things that we're looking to have accomplished.
Yeah. So I also want to talk about partnerships. You mentioned some of the partnerships that you think are having an effect on violent crime in the city. Talk about how important that is, that the police department is not kind of operating on its own.
Yeah, I took over as chief 2.5 years ago. I was an assistant chief for 11 years prior to that, and I understand the value of collaboration. It can't just be us. We all are vested in this community. Now, we got really fortunate and blessed to have a prosecutor in Kim Worthy who knows Detroit, right? Busiest county in the state. And then Don Eisen, who is the U.S. attorney, who is born in the city of Detroit, graduated from Cass Tech High School. So when you're talking to two very dynamic women in our state that are both committed to the city of Detroit, it certainly makes the conversations go a lot smoother as police chief when they're as invested in our city or vested in our city as you are as a police chief, and your meetings are more about solutions than problems. Yes, we both, or all three of us, have problems that we're trying to navigate. We need, certainly more resources and things such as that. But at the end of the day, it's solution-based meetings, and they have both been extraordinarily dynamic partners. And what they bring with them is leveraging other resources that they have. Prosecutor Worthy is committed to putting community prosecutors in precincts. U.S. Attorney Eisen is doing peaceniks and focusing on violent crime in the two most violent precincts in our community, and that's 8 and 9, but also putting that same impact in every precinct in the city of Detroit. I just talked to her yesterday about, the summer surge and what that looks like, doing some community town halls and bringing the message to the community, talking about going to barbershops. I mean, you got a U.S. attorney who's talking about, hey, let's go to a barbershop and deliver the message on violent crime, and what folks in that barbershop could take back with them to their respective areas of our city, and talk about, driving crime down, number one, but number two, the things that impact violent crime, people needing jobs, people needing resources, people needing education, and pointing them into those directions where they could get those things and hopefully not be A, crime victim, or B, crime perpetrator. So, and for those who choose the life of crime, let's have a very focused approach to getting those violent offenders off the street, and recognizing that everyone's not a criminal, right? I mean, actually, statistically, the criminal element in our city is very, very small. However, it wreaks havoc on our community. So I really enjoy working with both of them. We've got a very dynamic Wayne County executive who's committed to violent crime reduction in our community, in Warren Evans, who, again, former sheriff, former police chief. So I've got a lot of really good partners that are at the table, and funding that's being spread out for the purpose of reducing crime, not only in Detroit, but in this region. But certainly, we want to make sure that Detroit gets its part, and we're getting that with these relationships.
Yeah. So I want to talk about some other kind of background issues that I think always are lurking here in Detroit that have some relationship to the violent crime and to homicides. I want to start with the clearance rate, the percentage of homicides that were able to, identify a perpetrator and get that person prosecuted. We've had tremendous trouble with that in the past in Detroit. The rate has not been high. What does it look like right now, and what relationship do you think that has to the overall homicide number?
Well, the homicide rate, we closed out the year roughly around 50%, which is, right at the national average of homicide clearance rate. So we're not in a time that you and I both remember years ago during the bankruptcy where we were, 20% closure rate. It was just horrible. So 50% closure rate, as I indicated, is roughly around the national average. I'd certainly want to be around the 60 to 70%. I'd love to be around 100%, but realistically, that's not going to happen. There's so many different things that impact closure rate. But one interesting measurable I think we can all take from closure rates, particularly with non-fatal shootings and homicides, is the relationship with the police agency. There has to be community trust in order for people to participate in the prosecution of a perpetrator, and for a variety of reasons. But there has to be trust that if I share this information, it's going to be kept confidential and it's going to be moved through the judicial process professionally and respectfully of the person who is making the complaint. Obviously, a victim of homicide has to have a family representative and the state represent them. But as it relates to non-fatal shootings, I think there's a direct correlation with the non-fatal shooting closure rate and community trust because of the dynamics involved in that particular crime. So we're looking at that, and our closure rates on non-fatal shootings is not where we want them. And my emphasis this year is going to be to increase that closure rate. And we're doing that through social workers being assigned to our investigative operations. We're going to be hiring social workers. We got hired a few already to participate and help walk our victims through the process. We like to think that we're completely and 100% relatable in policing, but sometimes I find that we speak a lot of cop jargon that is intimidating to some, that nobody knows what we're talking about. And so we're going to get social workers who will be a bridge between the police and the victims to talk through what this process looks like, what the expectations are, what does it look like when you have to go to court, how you're going to get to court. And we think that's going to help with our non-fatal shooting closure rate. As far as our homicide closure rate, 50% is, as I said, is strong. But you've got, if you look at our 252 homicides, quick math tells us I got over 125 people that don't have some degree of closure in their families as it relates to their victim of homicide. So we have to do better, but we're confident that we can, and we've got a plan and a process that we're going to be deploying here pretty soon.
Yeah. I also want to talk about the national trend, which is for violent crime and homicides to go down. I spent a long time living in the Baltimore, Washington area. Both of those cities saw dramatic drops in their homicide rate or the homicide count last year as well. How much of what we're seeing here is just about that trend? And if that's true, how do you capitalize on it, right? How do you make sure that we keep going in the same direction?
Stephen, I always ask great questions. And I will tell you, I'm a data person like you. And I look at trend lines. I look at what the Detroit Police Department is doing and how we compare to other major cities. And what a lot of cities are reporting is a return to normalization pre-COVID, right? So you had COVID, this thing that happened that nobody saw coming. No one understood what it was. People were hopeless and didn't know if we were even going to live beyond it. It resulted in an uptick of violent crime. That, along with civil unrest, which overlaid COVID and lined up perfectly to create this uptick in violence around the United States. So when I look at Detroit, I don't look at just pre-COVID, right? I look at the COVID surge, where we are now, then I go pre-COVID, and then I go to to what is the normalization data tell us when Detroit is performing like Detroit. And I know that sounds a little weird, but we know that at the end of 2020, things were becoming somewhat disjointed as it relates to the uptick of COVID. Then we know that COVID, 2020, 2021 coming at the end of it, and when it became something that we knew we were going to have to live with, and the community all reacted to that, right? Whether it be people working from home, whether it be more violence, mental health issues, and so what I'm happy to say is that our numbers are lower than even pre-COVID numbers. So, our downturn in crime is not the normalization of COVID. We're lower than we were before COVID. And so the sustainability of that will be hard work, more officers on the street, smart deployment, and using the data to drive our decision making. You just can't police a city this size without letting the data tell you where your cops need to be. Because I don't have enough cops to put one on every corner, but I have enough cops to put them on the corners that they need to be in at particular times throughout the week based on the crime trends.
Yeah. I also want to give you a chance to talk about two high-profile murders that happened in the city last year, and I think it's always kind of controversial to talk about what's a murder that gets attention and what murders don't get attention and why. But there were two homicides that made a lot of news and had a lot of attention. One in Lafayette Park, the other in Boston Edison. One a successful doctor, the other someone who was a prominent member of the downtown synagogue in Detroit. And I want to have you talk about how satisfied, I guess, you are with the way the department has handled those murders, but also the pressure, I guess, it puts on you when murders happen that people, I guess, don't think are quote unquote normal, right? Murders that are outside of the places or the kinds of communities that people think they happen inside.
That's a very interesting assessment of what has transpired with these two particular cases, and they're all important to me. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. We had a beautiful mother leaving work, a nurse in the northwest side of Detroit, who was brutally murdered in a parking lot of a party store. She picked up a bottle of wine to celebrate the holidays with her husband last winter. Yeah. Very tragic, very sad, and we were able to close that case, within a reasonable amount of time. I know all the cases. I live them. They keep me up at night. And I think about the victims and the families. I had an 11-year-old child that we're focused on right now. 11-year-old roller skating in front of his house and was a victim of a drive-by a couple nights ago.
Yeah.
I have not gotten one phone call about that case, but I'm still committed and focused on doing everything we can to bring that family justice.
And
but
that's got to be frustrating. I mean, in a city where 200 or 300 people are murdered every year, most of them go unremarked. They don't get press coverage, which means that most people don't know about them. And the implication is we expect that this is going to happen to certain people in certain neighborhoods in certain circumstances. And then if it happens outside of that, it gets a lot more attention.
Yeah, it does. And, it's disheartening sometimes because I want the focus on all these cases. But speaking specifically to those two, I'm very proud of the work that the officers, the investigators, the Detective Bureau, homicide detectives have done. We don't take this work lightly. These officers, these detectives work hours and hours and hours, weekends and nights. And this is not you could come in at 8 o'clock and go home at 4 o'clock job, right? You come in when you wake up, you go home when the work's done for that day. And some days that's 10, 12, 15-hour days. The investigators are passionate about this work. They're committed to it. I get briefings on these cases at 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. I have been on the phone with detectives in tears that we have made an arrest. And that's how passionate they are. I will tell you, we've been talking about this 11-year-old murder, and the 11-year-old child who was murdered. And, you know, to listen to veteran detectives' voices cracking, talking about this case, you know, it just tells you how passionate and committed they are. But to your question, sir, I'm proud of the work that we've done, particularly. We'll start with Miss Wool, a beautiful member of our community, and it's a sad and tragic event that led to her death. I'm confident in the work that has been done. I'm confident in our suspect. Obviously, I can't go into more than that. And I'm confident that that same level of work ethic has been and will be deployed on Dr. Hoover. But we're not going to be pressured. We're not going to be rushed. This is too important of work to let political pressure and media pressure and community opinion force you into moving too quickly and haphazardly. That can result in the destruction of the case. But we're going to move deliberately because we got one bite at this apple. There's something called double jeopardy. We're not going to just run around and arrest folks and say, we think this is who did it. We're going to be able to prove that case. And then there's another part of this, right? I'm only one part. Then there's Madam Prosecutor who has to prosecute the case and sign the warrant. And you know, we have to work together to ensure that she has everything she needs to do her part of this process. I'm confident we're on the right track. We're going to keep working.
That is going to do it for us this week. You can find out more about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org, and you can connect with us anytime on social media. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
From Delta faucets to Behr paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Support also provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
The DTE Foundation proudly supports 50 years of American Black Journal in covering African American history, culture, and politics. The DTE Foundation and American Black Journal, partners in presenting African American perspectives about our communities and in our world.
Also brought to you by Nissan Foundation and viewers like you. Thank you.